Hello, we are here at the Maple Theater in West Bloomfield. I am sitting down today with Gary Wolfson and Michael Manasseri, the director of the Pickle Recipe and the co-writer-producer of the Pickle Recipe. Gentlemen, nice to meet you. Nice to see you today.
Thanks for having us. Yep.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. Your movie is available right now on demand. Right. It was a movie that was shot in Detroit. Yep. What can you tell people about the Pickle Recipe if they haven't heard about it or what it is?
You go first.
Well, it's more than just about a pickle recipe.
Okay.
It really is. It's a what we like to say. It's a very warm-hearted, family, funny movie that talks about family and their relationships, and it's about ingredients. That we are the ingredients in each other's lives, and my co-partner, Sheldon Cohn, who wrote and produced it, along with myself and Michael, we worked on this probably for 5 years.
Easy.
We probably had about 100 rewrites. But we wanted to make a movie that was funny and heartwarming and didn't have any F-bombs. And was shot here in Detroit. And just had a really good message. Made you feel good when you walked out of the theater.
Well, people know me. I want to say too, everybody knows that I'm a film critic, and everybody that does know me knows that I say it like it is. And I wanted to legitimately say that I'm not here just promoting your film to promote it. I actually really like this movie.
Woo-hoo!
Yeah, thank you guys. It started off though. I mean, clearly it's a comedy. It starts off, it's comedy. You can tell that the tone is being set. And then I found myself at the very end of the film with like a tear in my eye, and I was kind of like, I'm not crying, you're crying, yeah, kind of a thing. Exactly, verklempt. I learned a word in the movie. It's this touching movie though that I think is relatable. The characters, they're Jewish in this film. There's a great scene with Eric Edelstein. Is he the actor who plays the guy, comes in as a rabbi? Edelstein.
Yes,
Sorry.
that's okay. In the beginning, I wasn't sure either.
Okay, Eric Edelstein. There's a scene. So basically, the premise they're trying to acquire their grandma's secret pickle recipe for profit. And so you have this main character, he's doing it for his daughter, but there's all this kind of family stuff. Talk to me about assembling this cast. When you see this film on the page versus what you end up seeing when you were seeing the film, explain to me how it turned out as far as the casting in those roles.
Yeah, we had a really interesting casting process. So we had a casting director in Los Angeles, Yessi Ramirez, who went on to cast Moonlight.
Okay.
And
awesome.
and now is doing phenomenally well.
Yeah, right.
And then we also had local Michigan shout out to Carrie Ray, who was our Michigan casting director.
Okay.
And for our 4 leads, we looked at a lot of demo reels. A couple of people who we weren't familiar with in the beginning, like John Doerr, who's
plays
Joey,
the main character,
who's our lead. And she recommended him, and as well as Eric Edelstein, who, again, when we saw their reels, we saw what shows they had done. Basically, they were just so funny, and we knew that they could do it, that they could land it.
Interesting story about Rose.
Oh yeah, Rose. So so Rose, basically Sheldon, so his partner in crime. This is about 3.5, 4 years ago.
At least,
so they were still, I don't know, they were on draft 40 or something. And basically, Sheldon saw a short film online because he was like, we gotta find Rose. And I'm sitting there going, how do you finish the script? Finish the script.
Yeah, right.
And then we can talk about casting. And so he saw Lynn Cohen in a short film. What was it?
Lenny Rennerstahl.
Hitler's documentarian.
Hitler's documentarian, which is kind of ironic if you think about it.
Yeah. We love pickles. No. But basically, he felt that she captured the essence of this character in that short. And then, of course, my wife is a big Sex and the City fan. So I was like, oh, you mean Magda from Sex and the City?
Yeah.
And we all thought, yeah, she'd be great if we ever get the movie financed and if we ever can approach her, because we actually start the film, then she'd be great. And so, but it was constantly in Sheldon's mind, and then my mind, and then his mind, as they were churning out draft after draft.
Wow.
So when we finally, raised the financing and basically went, yeah, we're going to make this movie, she's the only actress we went to.
That's
for
awesome.
that part.
Yeah.
And when we sent out the script, she basically got back within a couple of days, and she said, I love this character, I really want to do this, but I will only do it on one condition.
And this is great.
So she's married to her husband, Ron.
Okay.
And she basically said, well, Ron's an actor, and I want him to be in the film. And we were like, well, hold up. But there's a really wonderful scene in the movie in a senior home. And there's a beautiful scene where basically he plays a former employee of hers, and he's suffering from dementia, and it's a beautiful, beautiful moment in the film.
Yep.
And that's her husband.
That's
so we
awesome.
got lucky.
So you got him in there. And he was great.
He was great.
Yeah, and he was great. And the reality is, when you think about it, we needed an older woman, you know, late 70s, early 80s, which is interesting because, you know, Hollywood always talks about casting women and older women in roles.
Sure.
And obviously, and you know, that category is fairly finite. I mean, you're not going to find 1,000 women actresses.
And no pun intended, but what a juicy role for somebody like that
it's a
to
great
jump
pun.
into, right?
No, it was, and she loved it, and she was terrific. And David Paymer.
Yeah, David Paymer. The other, really, it actually ended up being, it was a really cool situation because all of these actors, you know, they've all done a fair amount of work. You know, we're basically calling them up. They're reading the script. They all really like the script, the characters, but they had no idea who we were.
Sure.
And so for each of the leads, they all wanted to talk to me ahead of time before they said yes. And we had really great in-depth phone calls, you know, about the characters, but it wasn't just about the characters, it was about everything else around the movie. So for David, the fascinating thing about that conversation is he's directed a lot, you know, in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
A lot of television.
Yep.
And produced a lot of television. And so really, you know, he understood the character, he knew what we were looking for. He wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing. He wanted to talk about scheduling. He wanted to talk about, you know, how we're going to make this work. There's a lot of pages, there's a lot of locations. Really, it was about directing and producing.
Yeah.
When I had the conversation with him. It was about a 45-minute conversation, and if I had screwed that up, he would not have done the movie.
There you go.
So it was kind of a vote of confidence.
I was going to say, and what a resource also to have on. I read some of the production notes about how he there was a scene, there's a pivotal scene that he kind of helped out a little bit.
He made a great recommendation because we were, we would have gotten it done no matter what. But, so there's this massive scene, it's the end of the movie, we have extras, we have 9 speaking parts, and we only had 2 days to shoot it. And on the first day, we were trying to get 9 pages of dialogue, and it was this basic setup we were trying to get, and he just made a simple suggestion, and we go, oh, it's great, yes!
There you go.
And it made the scene better.
And he was a great Uncle Morty. I mean, so if he's thinking all this stuff in his back, he's still an actor, and he's a wonderful actor. His quiz show, City Slickers is where I recognize him from.
Yeah,
instantly.
Mr. Saturday Night.
Yeah, yep. And so, I mean, he's a perfect Uncle Morty.
You couldn't
ask for better
was great. He was.
So the movie itself, you know, again, what I took out of it was just the relatability of it. From the first scene with Rose, the grandmother character, I instantly was seeing my grandma. I have an Italian grandma, and I have kind of a southern, you know, country grandma. They're both gone, and I instantly, they each have these things. Food, as you know, you're Italian, and everybody, food is such a part of our culture, and it's such a part of our family. Like, it's all about the food, and we all try to mimic my grandpa's pancakes, and we can never do it. And my grandma had the sauce that nobody can, it's gone now, you know, like nobody knows how to do the sauce.
Yeah.
Even when she was around, people would try to get the recipe
And
and watch her.
They never get it right.
Oh, just put a pinch of that. What do you mean by a pinch, Grandma? Is that this or is it this, you know? And you throw
It's
all
like,
these
get out of
ingredients.
here.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just so relatable in that way. And then I love the metaphor at the end, how you, again, you mentioned it like a little bit about how just the flavors, like people around you are the ingredients of your life.
That's
and it's kind of how it ferments in you and kind of comes out. Talk about that theme, though. Is that what you started off with when you went to write the film? Was that theme kind of what you wanted to have play out?
Well, it's interesting because this is really loosely based on a truth.
Okay.
And it's based on my grandmother. Okay. And I'll go back a little bit. I don't know if I want to ramble too much for you,
Sure.
but you can always edit. When Sheldon and I were sitting around coming up with ideas for a movie, somehow we got onto the subject of, I don't know, I was talking about my grandmother. And my grandmother used to make the most amazing kosher dill pickles. When I was a kid, going over to her house in Detroit, and I'm 10 years old, and it's August, and I walk into her house, and the house is full of the smell of dill and garlic, and there's rows of pickles, all fermenting on her window. And the memories of that,
Yeah, sure.
eating those. Well, when my grandmother passed, she never gave the recipe to anybody.
Yeah.
Our family spent years trying to duplicate, just like you said.
yeah.
No, that's not a recipe.
Yeah.
So, and that was an important thing in my life growing up. And I said to Sheldon, you know, I'd kill to have that recipe.
Absolutely.
And we looked at each other and we said, wait a minute, there's
There it
something
is.
funny there.
Yeah.
So that was the impetus of the movie. I think, and as I said earlier before, it's really not about a pickle, and you touched on it. This is about sharing things.
Yeah.
And food and recipes and handing down traditions. And I think as we began to write it, it became more and more clear to us that the real common thread here, or the metaphor, was truly about ingredients.
Sure.
And that even though when you think about the deli and all the various people who make up the deli, you have Asians and African Americans and, you know, Rose, Jews, they're the ingredients for each other in their lives.
Yeah, exactly.
So that really kind of became more and more the focus.
And there's a couple things for me. One, so before I met Gary, I knew Sheldon for a couple of years, and Sheldon would always talk to me about, I want to make a movie. These guys made, I don't know, about 1,000 commercials together in their previous lives. And I said, well, okay, I mean, give me some ideas. So he would have great ideas, but most of those ideas, and we're sitting here in Detroit, and we're trying to get stuff
And it was still the
made.
Michigan incentive.
It was
Yep,
still the
yep,
Michigan
yep.
Senate, which is one of the reasons why I came here, but also my family's here.
Okay.
But all of Sheldon's ideas in the beginning were these big ideas. Great. Okay, let's go to 20th Century Fox and lose control of the movie, and it'd be great. Okay, well, some money might make this for $50 million.
Sure.
And then one day, we were. It could have been here. We could have been eating here, and he basically said, "Well, you know, Gary, one of my partners, has a really funny idea, I think, and it's about a guy who would kill or steal his grandmother's pickle recipe." And I went, "That's funny. That's
Sure.
a funny idea."
Yeah.
And that sounds like something we could actually do.
Yeah.
We could actually make this here in Detroit, and you know, we could do it at a reasonable budget and make it happen.
Yeah.
So they started writing, and yes, 5 years later, and many, many, many drafts, and you know, I don't know how
It
many.
was our
other-
first movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, but eventually got it done, got it to that point. So there was that, just in terms of, as he said, this is a sweet, funny, endearing film, and it's also a, you know, like nourishment. It's not just about like nourishing
Yeah.
your body, but it's
Yeah.
nourishing your soul. And yes, it's a pickle, but I'm Italian American.
Yep. As am I.
You know, I had, you know, if you're lucky in this life, you can have a wonderful relationship with your grandparents.
Absolutely.
And obviously it means it's a tremendous influence on our lives. And food usually is always a part of that.
Absolutely.
And that, you know, and so for my Italian grandmother, it was meatballs, it was sauce. And for the rest of your life, you're always looking for that sauce. Yeah, and you never find
And that's what's interesting is you're actually really not looking for the sauce. You're looking for that connection to your
You got
family
it.
and,
Yes.
and that memory of your own childhood or your family. And that's what I
Yeah.
love, without giving anything away with the movie. I loved the twist of the movie ends up kind of showing that it was more of a family, you know, the whole drive of it was more of a family thing than it was a financial thing or anything else that any of the characters were trying to gain from. They were actually trying to connect.
That's right.
And so I really dug that about the movie.
Thanks.
What is a scene, though? I'm interested being a writer. What scene would you, if you had to pick a scene from the movie that really you were just beyond proud of? Like, you know, you have one thing. It's one thing to write an idea. I think it's funny, and then it gets on screen, and you're like, wow, they really nailed it. You know, what you did with the direction of it really that scene came together. Are there any moments, or did the whole film just kind of feel like that?
Oh, it's an interesting question because I never really thought about it that way.
Okay.
Because I mean, for me, it was like all these little wonderful moments that came together. You know, I think there's a wonderful moment with Joey and Rose in the van, and there's a scene where they go and visit Rose's friend in a senior living, and she reflects on her life and what she's going to leave behind. What's she going to be remembered for? And there's conversation between Rose and Joey, which is, I think, really very sweet. But then I think we pull the rug from underneath the audience there, just when you think things are turning. And I love that because it is the ride that I think we wanted to give everybody, which is it's comedy, and then we kind of turn it a little bit. And there's heartwarming scene, and then, you know, not so much that all of a sudden you get, and then there's a little bit of comedy. So I think that one really kind of did a great job.
And I'm fascinated too from the directing standpoint, because I know too, you know, from being in video and film, that you can take a funny concept, have funny actors, and if you cut the scene wrong or you're hitting the wrong beats, it's not funny anymore.
Yeah, and there were, well, of course, we had interesting moments in post when we were putting it together, when we were editing, where a couple of times we went, ooh, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And our editor, Stuart Shevin,
It was great.
really great skilled craft editor. He would find ways, and he would say, well, okay, what if there are a couple scenes where we flip-flop moments.
Okay.
You know, the scene ended one way, and then we're watching us, that kind of falls flat, and we changed it up.
Sure.
And
suddenly you have something.
I mean, and in terms of I had a great time making this. And you know, as you said, you're in video production, so you guys also understand when you're making an independent film and you don't have a lot of money and you have a tight schedule, you are exhausted almost all the time.
Sure.
So it's like you've got a 6-month-old
I'm
that
still
cries all
exhausted.
night. Yeah, and but there was a joy for me in making this, because even though I was tired, even though there was tons of pressure, every time I got to watch the monitor and talk to the actors and be a part of this, of sculpting this with these guys, they made me laugh.
Yeah.
And I knew that, and even our local Michigan actors, everybody that, you know, kind of adds the ingredients in this film, I'm going to say it, I don't care, hopefully we're PG, they kicked ass. They did, they all came.
Oh yeah, they were great.
They were
great.
Everybody just added to this, and so within this silly, fun comedy, it was still real.
Yeah.
And, you know, back to your other question about scenes that could surprise you.
Yeah.
The first time we ever screened it, so this was before we premiered in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
We had a couple of people friends, relatives, our really wonderful director of photography, Jeff George. His parents came, and we had it at one of a theater associated with this theater.
Okay.
So we maybe had about 25 people.
Yeah.
And again, they had not seen it. We had never shown it to anyone. And we're watching it, and of course you're nervous. You're wondering what's going to happen. Is it a stinker? Did they really like it?
Sure.
And all the laughter, even surprise laughter at certain moments. But for me, as the director, this is why I mentioned Jeff George. So Jeff's father, when the movie's done, he's just crying. he's going. And other people also were talking about how touched they were at the end of the film.
Sure.
And at that point, for me, because obviously I'd seen the movie 400 times by then.
Right.
But for me, at that point, I was like, okay, we did something special.
There's something there.
And there is something there, and it's not just a silly comedy. There are all these other elements in there. And so for me, that kind of sealed the deal of like, whoa, okay, we did something right.
That's awesome. We'll talk more about that too, as far as the reaction that you've got overall. I know that you've played this not just in Michigan, but this is played all over the world. Talk about more of the audience reaction and just some of the things that you guys people have said or you've gotten out of people reacting to the film.
No, I mean, we got great comments when we did play in Santa Barbara. I think we went on to Palm Beach Film Festival. That was another festival. We got a lot of great stuff. And then we did a theatrical release. When was it? Like
It was late 2016, early 2017.
And we got a great reaction here in town. Obviously, we played here for I think 3 weeks.
I believe we broke the box office record for the Maple Theater for an opening weekend.
There you go.
And what's interesting is, we won the popular vote because we played in like over 40 film festivals throughout the world.
Sure.
And some people keep inviting us back, and the word gets out. And so, in that respect, we've gotten great reviews from people. The critics, not necessarily so kind to us, but we did win like I said, we won the popular vote.
We knew what we were making.
Yeah.
We knew what kind of, and I know I did, and they did.
Yeah.
We knew we were making just a sweet, family, fun film.
Yeah.
That's what we were making. We weren't making, an
It wasn't edgy, no, dark.
indie, dark comedy where everybody full frontal nudity. Well, wait a minute. I won't touch that because hey, you might be surprised.
That's true, actually. Spoiler alert.
But it's a crowd pleasing movie that we, again, we found that out at Santa Barbara where we premiered. I mean, it went nuts.
Yeah, they actually had to add another screen.
At like 8 a.m. on a Monday, and it was packed.
Wow.
And then our second screening there, we were up against the Super Bowl, and we thought, no one's going to come. It's the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Packed.
That's awesome.
So that was great. And then the really interesting thing about this process. So, I mean, I've been fortunate. I've been able to make other movies, direct some and produce a bunch. And some of them have, played at Cannes and Sundance and stuff like that. So usually with independent films, you are hoping to get into a festival, and we were really fortunate that we premiered at Santa Barbara. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Great experience. And then, because it is a Jewish family, we started to get invited to, and because the movie was good, it has to be good.
Sure.
But we started to be invited to Jewish film festivals. And, I had not made a comedy with a Jewish family before.
Okay.
So little did we know that there are over, I don't know, there's like 200 of them around the world. The really interesting part of that experience was when the Hong Kong Jewish Film Festival emailed us and said, we've heard about this movie, we'd love for it to play
proud and esteemed association.
Yeah, we played in Brazil, we played in Italy, we played in France, we've played in Poland many times, we played in the UK.
Australia?
Ireland, Australia.
It just speaks to the universality, the connection that people will feel with this. No matter, you don't have to be Jewish to really appreciate what's going on in this movie or to pick up on all the themes and that. We talk about this a lot on the show. You mentioned the critics versus the audience. I think that the days are gone where nobody's reading the newspaper anymore and looking for their local critics' review to find out what movies they should go see. A lot of it is. It's almost a badge of honor these days when people are like, hey, we have an audience score of a A+, even though the critics, it's 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience love it. Like, I think people actually react more to that. They're like, oh, wow, that's going to be a movie that I like. It's not going to be this hoity-toity artsy thing. I feel as a critic that we have a responsibility to tell people about whether a movie is good or not. Again, you're making a movie for a certain thing. I love The Naked Gun. I don't think that they set out to make Citizen Kane when they went to do The Naked Gun. So if I'm looking at that movie in terms of its cinematography, I'm probably going to mark it down somehow. And so I feel like there is a real thing that is a real thing that's out there that people can connect, audience can connect to a film, regardless of what a critic has to say about it. I'm a film critic, of course, saying this, but I always tell people that I like the idea of criticizing film to have a discussion about it afterward. It's not me recommending you go see it. It's us talking about it. Hey, I like this movie. You didn't. Why not? Let's talk about it. You know what I mean? What do you guys think? Coming into this process, did you have hopes that critics would appreciate it? Do you have a different, being in the industry, do you have a skewed view as to what you think of critical review? Is it one of those things like people say, oh, I don't care about the Oscars, but then if they get nominated, they're writing their speech at night and getting all into it. Like, what are your take on this?
I'll give you my take is, our hopes were high because we had done well in some of the, Santa Barbara, a few of the other things, and we got good reaction, and we got a really good reaction from the Hollywood Reporter when he was out in Santa Barbara. So we thought, oh, okay, maybe we've got something here. So when we did our theatrical, and we did go to, some of the big papers, obviously, we didn't get the reaction, not all, but as many. For me, what I was mostly disappointed about was they reviewed, okay, the movie, how it looks and the script, but no one really ever touched on the idea of the movie, what they were trying to say.
Sure.
And that to me was, whether you liked whether it was goofy or was cornball or whatever, or blah, 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 but nobody ever got to that point where they said, regardless of that, people will like it because it has this wonderful message about X, Y, and Z. And they never read that. And to me, that's what was disappointing.
I see.
Back to Santa Barbara, because again, that's we had our little tiny friend reviews, but boom, out into the world, that was a big deal. And mentioning the Hollywood Reporter critic, the great thing about that is he saw that with the audience, and he could not ignore
Great point.
the fact that everyone around him was
Absolutely
laughing
loving it,
and crying.
That's a great point.
And he mentioned that in
great.
his review. He basically said one of the big crowd pleasers at the Santa Barbara Film Festival is the Pickle Recipe.
There you go.
And so that was, that was nice. We were like, oh, I'm glad he saw it in the theater. Because as we started to get through, okay, we're going to have our theatrical release, what cities do we want to be in? We had discussions about, I love the New York Times, but we also had discussions of, do we want the New York Times to review this movie? Is it that kind of film?
Right.
In terms of a critical eye really looking at our movie. I'm immensely proud of this film for all the reasons that we talked about. Okay? But I also felt like, the New York Times might just kill it.
And they did.
And what you mentioned, here's what I would have loved for some of these bigger city papers to have said.
Okay.
Which is what you said when you started this conversation of, if they said something like, I really want you all to see this movie.
Yeah.
And then we could talk about it afterwards.
There you go.
That would have been great.
Right.
Because then they would have seen it.
I know we're going off topic, but when I have film people here, I just want to keep asking questions. But I have to ask you.
You're good with the time and
We're fine.
Yeah, okay.
We're all good.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
You're the ones that have to edit it. So,
10 minutes of them.
Yeah, well, it'll be quicker than that. But I want to
yeah.
ask you about that in general. It's changed so drastically over the last 30 years or so, as far as a film having to have success the minute it opens. You have that opening weekend, and that's all that it's about anymore.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a movie slowly building. The exception to this rule are when there are movies that are out there. If you look at movies that have this great audience support, but maybe were panned by critics, those are the few movies that actually end up gaining kind of momentum through DVD sales, through home box office, whatever. I'm thinking of movies like Office Space, a movie that was completely critically panned, everybody hated it, and now it's like known as this cult classic, awesome comedy.
Shawshank Redemption.
Shawshank Redemption did nothing at the box office. I mean, it was a critical success, but didn't really do well. How difficult is that environment as an independent filmmaker, as an independent screenwriter, to even get any sort of traction for your independent film, knowing you're already not going to be in 6,000 screens across America? It's all about those numbers and those little word of mouth kind of things that hopefully drive people to the theater.
Go ahead, take it.
Hindsight.
Yes.
I mean, listen, I think, again, just as filmmakers, any independent filmmaker, these are some of the most important conversations.
Yeah.
If you're actually lucky enough to get your movie made, and then you're lucky enough to get into some festivals, and some people are saying, this is really good, I mean, then it's about diving into, you don't think about this going in or in the process, but to the most important part, is anyone going to see this? How are we going to reach our audience?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm depending on this to help.
We call it the Movie Show Plus bump.
There you go. But yeah, you're having very in-depth conversations about where do we open it? How do we open it? How many screens? What's that cost? You know, how are we going to support this in certain markets? And you know, and how much money do we have left to do all of this? And it's and you're strategizing, and you're just hoping that, and you're depending. You know, you're also depending on other people in the distribution arena to help you.
Yes.
And you are kind of hoping and praying that they know what they're talking
Sure.
about.
You're at their whim.
And it's so it's a real guessing game. And I think for us, this is, you know, the critical time in terms of reaching people on demand.
Yep.
You know, to know that this movie's out there and all they have to do is go, oh, click, that looks funny.
Yeah.
That looks funny.
Yeah.
And I can watch that with my grandchild.
Yep.
Or I can watch that with my grandmother. A grandmother is our lead in this movie. Did I answer your question?
You did. That was great.
You wanna pitch it?
I would say being both on the marketing side, because I spent many years in advertising,
Yeah.
and the movies are very similar but very different. And to your point, you have a very critical window, particularly when you're doing theatrical. Hopefully you have a little bit more longevity once you get into video on demand and and streaming. But you also have so much competition.
Yeah.
And there's so much stuff to take away your attention from and not even just other movies.
Right.
I mean, other content.
Sure.
I mean, there's so much content and so much stuff.
Do you know how many kittens we are competing against? Sorry.
And tons. It's more than we can count.
It's true. And so I think that, for us, it was interesting, and kind of having a different skill set as a filmmaker / producer / marketer to sit there and go, well, because originally we did some mass media stuff. Mm-hmm. It's all really social, particularly for what we're doing on DVD. And I'm talking about stuff that obviously the audience is not going to be interested in. It's more filmmaker stuff.
Well, this will be good content for the website. Like, again, people will follow us back.
But I mean, we basically said, look, we know our audience. Where does our audience live? And if we're going to do iVOD, mm-hmm. we need to make sure that we can track as much as we can. So a lot of our money, very limited, is all on Facebook.
Yeah.
And we're making content with a great company that's doing social. It's all social. It's all Facebook, one platform, to get people to go to thepickerecipe.com/shop.
There you go.
Where they can buy our DVD.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Can you say that again?
I said you can go and get our DVD at thepickerecipe.com/shop.
And that was the Pickle Recipe.
Thepickerecipe.com.
That's
right.
Got it.
/.
That's //
Don't try the backslash.
but I
Go to a whole different website.
But learning that was really an important process.
Yeah, sure.
We have to see how we can generate and measure stuff. So besides just being a filmmaker, if you're an independent filmmaker, you better be a damn good marketer.
I'd be remiss. I have to fit this in real quick as we're running slightly on time. What do you guys think? This movie also acts as kind of a relic to the Michigan film incentives.
You bet.
This was, as you told me earlier, the actual the very last film that was made under the incentives. I don't even know where to go from that, but I mean, tell people about why that was important and why it's not a good thing that it's not here.
Yeah, I mean, I am a product of the Michigan Film Incentive. My family, we're not originally from Michigan, but my family, my parents, other siblings have been here for about 15, 16 years. And when the film incentive started, around 2009, I'd been in Los Angeles for a fair amount of time doing this, making independent films. But I miss my family, I miss my parents. The incentive was a huge part in me moving to Michigan. So yes, of course, I wanted to be able to call my dad and say, hey, let's get some coffee.
Yeah.
At the same time, I had to continue my career. And so I thought, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can, start a production company in Michigan, bring films that I would have made in Hollywood to Michigan, and actually set them up. But in terms of what the incentive was about, in wanting to bring people here, show them the state, show them the city, create, stem the brain drain, and keep creatives, keep kids coming out of college from any school, from jetting to New York, LA, Chicago, etc. It was working. And, for me, a house, a car, I got married, I'm paying taxes, all of those things that basically the incentive was about.
Okay.
That's me.
Yeah,
And
sure.
now I'm like one of the only guys left in town.
Yeah.
So it was a political football from the beginning, as you know.
Yep.
And it's for this community. We just want to talk about filmmakers, or the creative community. Obviously, it was a huge hit that it went away. You can't sugarcoat it. You can't. I mean, I was fortunate. I was able to get a number of films made. I was able to draw, one in particular film that was going to shoot in LA. A buddy of mine was going to shoot it, and I said, hey, you should look at Michigan.
Yeah.
And we did, and we shot the movie here.
Okay.
And so I've been fortunate enough that my company was established, and so I do music videos, commercials, and all that kind of stuff, and I still do them here. But since the incentive went away, I'm sorry I'm going on and on.
No, that's okay.
So much harder to actually bring projects here. And, I can generate projects from here because that's also what I do.
Yeah.
And I've been able to shoot some stuff without it. But in terms of competing with Georgia or Louisiana,
It's not
or
even a contest.
Yeah.
no, there's just no way.
Yeah.
So, we've got an election coming up. Please vote.
What was that again? I didn't hear that last
We have an
part.
election coming up. Vote!
Oh, there you go.
And vote for the Pickle Recipe.
Forget about voting. Wait a minute. We're here because of this.
Tell us about, real quick, tell people where people can find this. The Pickle Recipe, again, this is a special
Edition.
edition
That's
that people
right.
that
What's
is
so
available
special
now.
about it, Gary Wolfson?
Well, if you go to our website, thepicklerecipe.com //shop.
Forward.
Forward slash.
That's our /
I don't know.
It's on the screen right now.
Okay. What we've done is we put together a DVD, either DVD or a Blu-ray, that you get, and you get the movie plus the yak of Michael and myself and Sheldon Cohn talking about the movie, and we cover just things that we're talking about here, locations and those kinds of things. But not only do you get that, but wait, there's more. Everybody will get
Tell them what they'll win.
They'll get a deluxe pickle pen, which actually was wildly successful when we were in Santa Barbara. So, but the other thing is we give some of the money that to a food bank called Mazone, which helps the hungry both in Israel and the United States. So,
Fantastic.
not only are you getting a great movie, we can say so myself, you're getting our commentary, you're getting the pickle pen, and you're doing great by giving food to people who need it.
Fantastic. In addition to all of that, though, it's a great film. I think people will love it. Families are going to like it. One last note, we'll leave this, since this all was all about Detroit. This movie was set in Detroit, filmed in Detroit, took advantage of the Michigan film incentives. I'll give you the last word on this in terms of what was it like. Tell us about just the idea of shooting here.
Yep.
and kind of how that played into some of the ingredients that went into the pickle recipe.
Yeah. So I've lived in Metro Detroit for the last 8 years. I moved here with the incentive. My family's in Metro Detroit. They've been here for a while. But these guys, born, raised, natives, all Detroit. And all of that is in this story. And these are working class people. She runs a deli. In terms of locations, in this subject, the deli in the film itself is a character.
Sure.
And so after we cast our 4 leads, we also knew we had to cast the deli. This deli is supposed to be 50 some odd years old. She ran it with her late husband.
Yeah.
She still runs it. It had to have a certain vibe, a certain feel.
Authenticity to it, yeah.
Right, of a Detroit deli that's been there forever. You walk in and it's like, the fixtures have been here forever. The counter's been here forever. And if you saw, I won't plug another movie, but if you saw Deli Man, or delis are disappearing.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so when we were looking around to cast our deli, there was some, it was incredibly important that we found the right deli. And when we walked into this location, we knew. We just knew. You're going to have to edit for a second. It's
Sure.
been a while and I'm tired.
No worries, no worries, no
High
worries.
grade deli, Jesus.
It was a high-grade deli.
Okay,
it was
so-
a high-grade
So-
deli.
yeah.
When so casting the deli was an incredibly important part of this movie, and you just knew when you had to walk in, everything had to feel authentic, like things have been there for 50 plus years. And when we walked into the high grade deli on Michigan Avenue, we knew it. Everything had been there, and it had that feel, it had that texture. We, our production designer, set deck, art direction, they went in, they made a few slight changes, but really not much. One of them was, again, as you know, as a filmmaker, in the actual deli, one side of the deli, there's a mirror.
Yeah,
Although,
sure.
that runs the whole, so we had to cover that.
Yeah, okay.
When that helped us decide our color palette and things like that. But, but just that kind of location, which worked wonderfully. So shout out to the High Grade Deli, great corned beef, go. But also just the rest of shooting in and around Detroit. These are real working class people, and it was important for us to just show their environment, where they lived, where they worked, where they played, and
Rose's house was in Hamtramck.
Yep. That was funny driving up.
Oh yeah. Morty's place of office looked exactly like what it does in the movie.
And that was on West 4th Street.
Yes, I mean, we just removed a couple of things, but I mean, it was amazing. An art director's dream. So we had amazing locations, and I think giving Michael credit, that these locations were like casting characters.
Sure.
And they were as important to buy into these characters as the characters themselves.
For sure.
So, shout out to Shir Shalom, who let us use their sanctuary and all their
banquet
offices,
hall.
their banquet hall, for I don't know how many days. So yeah, I mean, great lighting, great locations.
And it was important. We weren't sitting there saying we want to avoid all of the ruin porn, all that Detroit has been, depicted around the world.
Right.
It wasn't really so much of a we don't want to show that. It was just about that's not what this movie's about.
Yeah.
This movie is about what these real people do and how they live and where they're at. And we do love this city.
Yeah.
So, we wanted to have a positive spin on it, but it also wasn't where we really went, we must avoid things.
That's interesting too, because it's like, it wasn't a gimmick that it was in Detroit, and that's what sucks about the film incentive going away is you're not going to see movies like this anymore. Hollywood usually comes and shoots in Detroit when there's a gimmick for it.
Sure.
Beverly Hills Cop, they have to show and establish that this cop lived in Detroit and came from this crime, and had all this street smarts and all these kinds of things. It's always like a gimmicky thing instead of it just being a setting. And people who know and love the place and live here know that there's so much beauty and unseen kind of. It has its own vibe, its own voice, its own stories to tell. And I loved that you did that in the film. Again, there's little touches that people in Detroit will pick up on that nobody else will, but it doesn't hit you over the head with anything Detroit. It just kind of puts you here.
Yeah,
and I love that.
And when we screened around the world at different festivals, there were two comments in terms of what we shot in terms of locations. A lot of it was, wow, I didn't know Detroit looked like that.
Yeah, sure.
That's really interesting. That looks like a really cool place. The other comment was mostly from retired people who moved away.
Okay.
And they were so happy that we put Detroit in a positive light, and that's what Detroit was like when I was a kid. That's what it was like when I lived there, and they were so appreciative that we, that's what we showed. And anything else on that?
No, and I think what's interesting is, I'll just touch a little bit, and it's a minor thing, but one of the things that we did is, as Joey is getting to the deli, on his way to the deli, you see what I would call the tastes and the things that make Detroit, Detroit. Great Middle Eastern food. You have restaurants, you have Mexican, I think we went down to...
we were everywhere.
We were everywhere. So you see all these great places that we have.
Eastern Market.
Eastern Market, all these venues. You begin to understand there's a flavor about this city.
Yeah.
Not only in its makeup and in its people, but what they bring to the table too.
Which, and to close it with the metaphor, it's Detroit is its own pickle recipe. That is kind of been fermenting here for years, and we don't know the ingredients, but we know that it's special.
Time to enjoy.
Exactly, time to enjoy.
You
Gentlemen,
should write that.
I might. Hey guys, thank you so much.
Thanks a
This
lot.
was a great pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Watch the Pickle Recipe. Go buy this today. One more time.
ThePickleRecipe.com/shop.
There it is.